Hine matov, how good it is, umanaim, how sweet it is to be together on this day. New melody. Hine matov, umanaim, sheverachim gam yachad. Hine matov, umanaim, sheverachim gam yachad. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine matov, umanaim, sheverachim gam yachad. Hine matov, umanaim, sheverachim gam yachad. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine matov, umanaim, sheverachim gam yachad. Hine matov, umanaim, sheverachim gam yachad. We begin this morning with the meditation of our soul. In the Siddur on page number 99, page 99 in our Siddur, this meditation begins with the words Elohai, oh my God, Neshama, the soul, Shenatata bi, that you gave me. Every single day upon awakening, we have an opportunity to pause and reflect on what it means to be gifted a soul, the beneficiary of a soul. It's on page 99 on the English side, this first blessing. My God, the soul that you've given me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me. You watch over it when it is in me. In the future, you will take it from me, but then restore it to me in the world that is coming. As long as the soul is within me, I thank you, Adonai, my God, God of my ancestors, ruler of all creation, master of all souls. Baruch atah Adonai, who restores the soul to the lifeless form. Last four lines. As long as the soul is within me, I thank you, Adonai, my God, God of my ancestors, ruler of all creation, master of all souls. And what captures me today as I read this is that this meditation, which is focused on the individual, one of the few prayers in our Siddur focused on the individual, demonstrates in the large majority of itself the focus on the self, the one. However, ruler of all creation, master of all souls, does not exclude others. The exaltation of the glory of you does not eliminate the exaltation of the glory of your neighbor, for she or he all were made in the image of God. The way we begin our morning meditation is by saying that he is just as important as she just as important as I just as important as they, and so forth. In a spiritual way, what's the translation in our daily lives of this perspective that all people are seen as beautiful and spiritual creatures? Draw that out and see how this is a recipe for creating a society of caring and respectful and respected people. It doesn't say Jewish, it says people. So the way the Jews begin is by demonstrating, again, lofty appreciation of and respect for people of all backgrounds. And now we rise the early morning blessings, the Birchot HaShachar, on pages 103 and 104. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech v'ivino lahavchin ben yom u'ben layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani b'tzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. The top of 104. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asa li kol tzarki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tif'ara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten layav koach. Hunenu hayom b'chol yom l'chenu chesed rachamim b'lechen avachim chasim tovim Baruch atah Adonai gabech t'may Yisrael. And as we're seated in the center of this little concluding stanza, there's a phrase, do not let the inclination to evil control us. Do not let us be controlled by the inclination to do evil. Each and every one of us, on 1,000 occasions every day, has the opportunity to make a decision to do the right or the wrong thing, to act the right way or the wrong way, to speak cruelly or to speak constructively, to offer care or to offer a sense of humiliation. Every single day we are to be mindful of how will I behave and how will my words exit my mouth. On page 112, the Psalm for Shabbat herself, page 112. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, tov lahodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, lahagid baboker chastecha, ve'emunatcha balelot, alei asor v'alei navel, alei higayon bechinot. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, tov lahodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. Ki simachtan Adonai b'folecha, b'maaseh yadecha ranen, magalu maasecha Adonai mod, amku machshavotecha. Mizmor shir liyom HaShabbat, tov lahodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. Tzadik katamar yifrach keres Balbanon Yiska Shetulim Beveit Adonai Bechatrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvon Beseva Tisheni Varananim Yeyo Lehagid Ki Ashar Adonai Suri V'lo Ablatabo. Baruch Shamar on page 122. Baruch Shamar B'haya ha'olam Baruch Hu Baruch Oseh V'Reshit Baruch Omer V'Oseh Baruch Gozer Umekayim Baruch Merachem al Haaretz Baruch Merachem al Habriot Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov Lireov Baruch Chaylod V'Kayom Lo Netzach Baruch Podeh Umatzil Baruch Shemo. On the English side, we will celebrate you, Adonai, our God, with praise and song. We will extol, acclaim, and glorify you, honoring your name and declaring that you are our sovereign God, the singular one who gives life to the world, the sovereign who is praised and glorified forever and ever. This is your great name. Baruch atah Adonai, sovereign, celebrated with songs of praise. Yochid Cheho Olamim, Melech Meshubach Umfawar, Adei Ad Shemo HaGadol, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech Melo Batishbachot. Turning to page 126, there's a phrase that calls out to me from this selection. This is a compendium of different verses from different portions of the Bible. It's an anthology, you might say. And it's the second stanza down. It's the first obvious line of the second stanza. Hoshia et Amecha. On the English side, the English translation is deliver and bless this people whom you have made your own, shepherd them and exalt them forever. I've never been a shepherd. I've seen sheep and goats in zoos and on farms. I've never tried corralling sheep and goats. But I would imagine that it takes a bit of effort because they're probably running hither and yon, and you've got to be in charge of them. So look at the Hebrew. Shepherd them, that's Ur-Aim, V'nasem, exalt them. V'nasem, exalt them. I haven't thought about a shepherd as exalting sheep before. What does that mean for a person to exalt sheep? Especially when the person's livelihood depends upon the care. Just let's turn that around. Instead of thinking about control and owning as property, what if we just pause and see animals and people in a situation where we treat them in an exalted manner? Hoshia et Amecha, literally deliver and save your people whom you have made your own. Look at the Hebrew through transliteration. Hoshia et Amecha, uvarech et nachalatecha. Nachalatecha, ur-aim, v'nas-aim, ad olam. Hoshia et amecha, uvarech et nachlatecha, orem, 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 benasem, orem, benasem ad haolam. Hoshia et amecha, uvarech et nachlatecha, orem, 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 benasem, orem, benasem ad haolam. Hoshia et amecha, uvarech et nachlatecha, orem, 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 benasem, orem, benasem ad haolam. Hoshia et amecha, uvarech et nachlatecha, orem, 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 benasem, orem, benasem ad haolam. Hoshia et amecha, uvarech et nachlatecha, orem, 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 benasem, orem, benasem ad haolam. Hoshia et amecha, uvarech et nachlatecha, orem, 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 benasem, orem, benasem ad haolam. Hoshia et amecha, uvarech et nachlatecha, orem, 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 benasem, orem, benasem ad haolam. Ashrei on page 136. Singing Psalms of Praise, page 136. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, od yalucha selam. Ashreim shekachalo, Ashreim sharonoi elov. Tila David, aromim chalai hamelech. Vavracha shimcha leolam voed, v'chol yom avarcheka, v'ahalala shimcha leolam voed. Gadol Adonai mulal mod, v'lig dulato ein cheker, dulador yishabach masecha, v'gvorotecha yagidu, hadar kavod odecha, v'divrei niflotecha asicha, ve'ezuz norotecha yomero, v'gedoletecha asapreno. Zecherav tuvacha yabeo, v'tzid katacha yeraneno. Chanun rachum Adonai, erech apayim ugdol chesed. Tov Adonai lakol, v'rachamov al kol ma'asav. Yoduch Adonai kol ma'asecha, v'chasidecha yevarchucha. Kavod malchutcha yomero, u'gavoratecha yedaberu, lahodia livnei hadam gevurotov, u'chavod hadar malchuto, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'mem shaltecha b'chol dor vador. Somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, v'zokef l'chol hakfufim. Einei chol alecha yasaberu, v'ata noten lahem et achlam be'ito, poteach et yodecha, u'maspia l'chol charatzon, tzadik Adonai b'chol derachov, v'chasid b'chol ma'asav, karov Adonai l'chol korov, l'chol asher yikrohu v'emet. Ritzon Yerev Yaseh, V'yet Shabbatam Yishma V'yoshiem, Shomer Adonai et kol oavav, V'yet kol harshaim yashmid, Tilat Adonai yidaber pi, V'yivarech kabasar Shem Gacho li'olam voed, V'anachnu nevarech Yah me'ata v'ad olam, Hallelujah. Psalms come from the Bible. The Hebrew word is Tehillim. Tehillim is Psalms. Tehillim is a Yiddishized pronunciation. Tehillim. If you look at the third line at the top of the page, 136, it's Tehillah David, literally a psalm of praise of David or by David. You might say Tehillah. And if you turn to page 137, more Psalms 138 and so forth, all the way through. I'm looking at page 137. The last little stanza with the little red arrow on the English side. These are religious poems in poetry and in melody and in metaphor. They're trying to activate something within us. Look at this. Adonai cares for the stranger. Adonai sustains the orphan and the widow. God blocks the path of the wicked. God shall reign forever. The identity of God is wrapped up in the care of people. The identity of God is wrapped up in the caring of people. And then, if you will, just think in your mind to the Amida when we stand up and we sing, Mechakel Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayei Meitim B'Rachamim Rabim. The nickname of that little blessing is Gvurot, God's powers. And the description of God's powers is caring for the sick and the weak and the brokenhearted and those who have fallen down, breaking the chains of those who are imprisoned. God's power is not in the creation of explosions and lightning storms. God's power is expressed in the caring of people in need. And we turn in appreciation and gratitude and awe. Page 141, it's the concluding psalm of the book of Tehillim in the Bible, and it's placed here in the Siddur every single day. I think it's a way of, as if we could, if we had the time, we'd be studying the entire book of Tehillim, Psalms every day, but that would be unworkable for most of us. So we have the last psalm here on page 141. Hallelujah, hallelujah, el bekadsho, hallelujah, brikia uzo, hallelujah, vigvurotav, hallelujah, karav gulo, hallelujah, beteka shofar, hallelujah, benevel v'chinor, hallelujah, betofu makol, hallelujah, b'mini v'ugav, hallelujah, betziltzalei shema, hallelujah, betziltzalei trua, kol hanshama te'alel yah, hallelujah. Kol anshamat aleluya, hallelujah, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, la 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 la. And on page 145, the first line, taking hold of that same message, page 145. Nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Ruach habasar tefer olam Ato Umeldo Mashiach Podel Mato in Little Melchot Look at the poetry here. It's about 12 lines up from the bottom of page 145 on the English side. Were our mouths filled with song as the sea? Were our mouths to be filled with song as overflowing as the waves of the sea are cascading forth? If only our mouths could convey that much movement and loft and power and vibrance. That's what this poem is saying. The last three lines, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, to praise your name for even one of the myriad moments of kindness with which you have blessed our ancestors and us. Shochenah, page 147. Shochenan marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv ranenu tzadikim baronoi laisharim nova tehillah b'fi yesharim tithalal u'v'divrei tzadikim titbarach uvelshon chasidim titromam uvekerev kedoshim titkadash uvemakalot rivavot amcha bet Yisrael. Lodo lahalel lishabech lafael rumim lader lekales hakol yishur v'tish b'chot David ben Yishai avdecha meshichecha. Top of 148. Yishabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu ha'el ha'melech Hagadol ve'akadosh b'shamayim u'va'aretz ki lecha na'eh Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elokei avoteinu ve'imotenu shir u'shvacha halel ve'zimra ozu memshala netzach gedula u'gvura tela v'tif eret Kedusha u'malchut brachot v'arot me'ata v'ad olam Baruch Adonai El melech gadol b'tish b'chot El ha'odot Adonai niflot habocher b'shirei zimra melech elchei olamim. We rise the bracha on page 150. If you are able to do so at home, you're invited to rise as well. The Birkat HaOr. We rise for this bracha. For this bracha testifies to the beauty of the world itself. And there are some within a variety of traditions and communities who remain standing from here all the way through the Shema and on to the Amidah. And others, frankly, well, we've stood for the bracha, which is the narrow definition of, you might say, the traditional requirement, and you can be seated for the Shema. So the question is, what does it mean to stand for the bracha, which introduces the Shema, but to be seated for the Shema itself? In a way, the focusing on day and night and the world and its contents might even be more important than the Shema, because the Shema is focusing our attention on our community. The Borchu in its bracha is thinking about the entire universe. And we are one small part of the universe, and there are many other parts that aren't Israel. And that's part of God's beauty. The bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or borech choshech oseh shalom uboreh et hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, forming light and creating darkness, bringing harmony while creating all. And if so inclined, you may be seated. The top of page 154 on the English side. (154). You have loved us deeply, Adonai, our God, and showered us with boundless compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you, and to whom you taught the laws of life, so may you be gracious to us and instruct us. Kind Creator, have compassion for us, open our hearts so that we may understand and with love discern, hear, and study, observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah, Attach our hearts to your mitzvot. Unify our hearts to love and revere your name, so that we never lose hope. As we trust in your great, holy, awe-inspiring name, we will delight and rejoice in your deliverance. Gathering the tzitziot together. The bottom stanza on 154 on the Hebrew side. V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu komemiyot le'artzenu ki el poel yeshuot ata Uvanu v'charta mikolam v'lashon v'keraftanu l'shimcha hagadol selah be'emet lahodot lecha ol yachercha ba'ahava Baruch atah Adonai Habocher b'mo Yisrael be'ahava. Page 155. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Hashem Kvod Malchut Olam V'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shachbecha u'v'kumecha u'kishartam la'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'sharecha. The middle of page 156, the third paragraph, beginning with the words Vayomer. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, Taber el b'nei Yisrael v'marta lehem v'asulem tzitzit al kanfei vigdehem ledorotam v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf petil techelet v'yalacham letzitzit Uritem oto, uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, v'asitem otam, v'lo taturo, acharei levavchem, v'acharei einechem, asher atem zonim achareihem, l'man tizkeru, v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'item kerushim leloechem, ani Elohechem, asher otzeiti etchem meretz Mitzrayim liot lachem lelohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem emet. On page 157 on the English side. You were always the help of our ancestors, a shield and deliverer for their descendants in every generation. You abide at the pinnacle of the universe. Your judgment and your righteousness extend to the ends of the earth. Blessed are the ones who attend to your mitzvot and place your teaching and words on their hearts. That is referring to us. We're described by the Siddur as being blessed. Wonder within your own mind about what that means for yourself to be blessed. To see yourself as blessed because of your connections with God and the Jewish people. Mi chamocha on page 158. Mi chamocha poelim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nara tehilot osei fele, shira chadasha shibchu geulim l'shimcha al sefat hayam, yachad kulam hodu v'imlichu v'yamro Adonai yimloch le'olam ba'ed Tzur Yisrael koma be'ezrat Yisrael ufdei chinumecha Yehuda v'Yisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzvot shemo Kedosh Yisrael. We rise for the Amidah, beginning on pages 159 and 160, chanted aloud, and thereafter continuing in silence until the Amidah's conclusion on page 166. Again, 159 and 160 aloud, thereafter concluded in silence. If you're just joining us, or perhaps you're new to the Siddur, and you have the Lev Shalem Siddur, we chant aloud the opening two pages, and if your Hebrew is a little rusty, the transliteration is found at the very end of the Siddur, literally the last page. It's 466. That's the transliteration. A reminder, we've been working on getting our feet in sync with our minds and our mouths. On page 159, it's the first line. This is in a whisper. It's three small steps backwards. Adonai, Sifatai, Tiftach, Ufi, Yagid, Tilatecha. We've moved ourselves out of where we were, and we're preparing for being in the Amidah. That's the practice. We begin aloud. Adonai, Sifatai, Tiftach, Ufi, Yagid, Tilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanoram El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol Zocher chaste avodim mahot umevi goel livnei v'neihem lama'an shemo b'ahava melech ozer ufoked u'mashiach u'magen baruch atah Adonai magen Abraham ufoked Sarah Atah gibor le'olam Adonai mechayei metim atah rav lahoshia Mashiv haruach u'marid hagashem mechalkel chayim bechesed mechayei metim berachamim rabim somech noflim verofeh cholim omatir asurim omekayem emunato lishenei afar michamocha ba'al gevurot
Omed Melach, Melech Memit Umechaye, Umatzmeach Yeshua, Fneman Atalachayot Metim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechaye HaMetim.
(168), page 168, our Torah service. En kamocha v'Elohim Adonai, v'en k'maasecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam voed. Adonai oz le'amo yitein. Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Av harachamim heitiv avirtzoncha et Zion. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, Kivecha levad batachnu, Melech Elram v'nisa, Adon olamim. Please rise.
Vayehi bin Soa Haaron Vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai Ve'afutzu Oyevecha Ve'anusu Misanecha Mipanecha Ki Mitzion Tetzei Torah Ki Mitzion Tetzei Torah Udavar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah La'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. Ribono Shel Olam, during these very strange days and times, allow us to not fall into a pit of discouragement. Grant us the strength to be encouraged, to live our lives in honor, self-respect, and pride as Jews. Grant us the strength to be encouraged to walk forward every single day in our world with our heads held high, reminding ourselves and others that we are committed to paths of menschlichkeit and mitzvot, bringing goodness and righteousness into our world. And we have nothing to be ashamed of. Remind us that we are part of your world and part of your universe for a sacred purpose, to live with kedusha and kavod, holiness and honor. The bottom of page 170. Bebe an arachetz v'lishmei kadisha yakira anna emar tushbechan Bebe an arachetz v'lishmei kadisha yakira anna emar tushbechan Yehera avakadamoch dotiftach libi b'araita v'tashli mish'alein t'libi v'liba dechol amach Yisrael letavu l'chayin v'lishlam Amen. Shema is on page 171.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai Tin Ramama Shmo Yachtav L'cha Adonai HaGedula VaGevura והתפארת והנצח וההוד ככל בשמיים ובארץ, ככל בשמיים ובארץ. אדוני הממלכה והמנשא לכל ראש. רוממו, רוממו, אדוני אלוהינו, וישתחוו, וישתחוו, לאדם רגליו קדוש הוא. רוממו, רוממו, אדוני אלוהינו, וישתחוו, וישתחוו, להר קודשו, להר קודשו, כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו. We are seated. Thank you. תודה רבה. The Torah reading for today is known as Teruma, and we begin in the Chumash on page 495, page 495. If you have a Tanakh and not the Chumash, it's the equivalent of Exodus chapter number 26, Exodus 26, in our Chumash, page 495. Exodus chapter 26, verses 31 and following. Verses 31 and following. We are now in the wilderness, and we're still at the base of Mount Sinai. And Moses has been up and down on the mountain the past 2 weekly parshiot, describing his up and down. And on certain occasions, he's been joined by Aaron and other elders of the people of Israel, and the laws are being shared with the community of Israel. And now we have this week's Torah reading, which is called Teruma, and next week's Torah reading called Tetzaveh, and they are essentially a very long continuation of one parsha. That's this week, Teruma and Tetzaveh. And then we skip and we look ahead, which is Kitisa, which is 2 weeks from now. And then we get to Vayakhel and Pekudei. Teruma and Tetzaveh, this week and next week, talk in great detail of the construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. We skipped Kitisa, which has its own material. Then we get to Vayakhel and Pekudei, and we have 2 Torah readings that talk about the actual construction phase. So this week and next week are the blueprints, skip a week, and then 2 weeks, the fulfillment. So 4 Torah readings are devoted to very specific construction details, instructions, and then the carrying out of the construction of the tabernacle. And we might say, why is so much detail given to building the Mishkan? And this year I had a new thought. We're supposed to try to have new thoughts as we study Torah. For 210 years, the Israelites built for other people. For 210 years, they built for someone else without any control, without any say-so over their lives. And their lives were reduced to only fulfilling a task to such an extent that the task was more important than they, and they often paid with their lives for not fulfilling the task properly enough in the eyes of the slaveholders. And now it's been some span of months, and time continues. Total time at the site of the mountain in Sinai is about 13 months. For the first time in 6, 7 generations, they're building something for themselves. What does it mean for somebody to say, wait, I'm not building because you're forcing me to. I'm building because I see value in it for me and for my family and for my community. And once that thought occurred to me, I saw Teruma and Tetzaveh this week and next week in a different light, and I'm looking forward to seeing Vayakel Pekude in 3 and 4 weeks in a different light as well. There's a sense of satisfaction, a sense of honor, that I can do something to make a lasting imprint, not only upon me and my immediate family, but on my community for generations to come. And according to our best understanding of Jewish history, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was in use for perhaps 400 years. The 40 years wandering here in the wilderness, and then at one point in time, there's a reference in the book of prophets that the tabernacle was used for 360 years and perhaps more. So for 400 years, ostensibly, the tabernacle is being used. It's a portable structure, which means it's being assembled and disassembled and moved from point A to point B. And so obviously, if you're packing up and rearranging over a span of 4 centuries, there are going to be times when things wear out, and you need to know how to replace those furnishings and those knobs and those hooks. And that may be why Teruma and Tetzaveh this week and next week, and then skipping Vayakel Pekude, are so detailed so that the people know how to continually refurbish and maintain the Mishkan. So now just a short aliyah. Again, we're reading from page 495, verse 31. The parochet was a curtain, and it was placed in a certain way so that there was a sense of glory and beauty and excitement, and the innermost chamber, which contained the ark, was behind the curtain, the parochet, as it's called in Hebrew. ועשית פרוכת תחל את ברגמם בתולת שני ושש מזר מעשה חשב יעשה אותם קרובים ונתת אותה על 4 עמודי שיטים מצופים זהב ובהם זהב על 4 עני כסף ונתת את הפרוכת תחת הכרסים וביתו שמה מבית לפרוכת את ארון העדות ודילה הפרוכת לם בין הקודש ובין קודש הקודשים. Kodesh means holy. Kodeshim means holies plural, the holy of holies. So the parochet stood as a definer of boundaries, and only the ark was behind the parochet in the Holy of Holies. And of course, once it was set up and constructed, it was only accessed by Aaron the high priest. So let's back up a little bit. A curtain. We've all grown up in association with different kinds of synagogues and congregations and buildings throughout our involvement in Jewish life. Have you ever seen a curtain on the outside of an ark? Perhaps in a different synagogue or congregation? So, probably in the medieval period, there was kind of a call backward in time to this reference, and there were curtains on the exterior of ark doors. And at a certain point in time, those curtains became very elaborate and ornamental. So perhaps if you ever encounter a museum of Judaica, you might see freestanding or preserved behind glass, let's say, very ornate and elaborately woven parochot, which is what this is. It's a curtain in front of the doors. When I was growing up, we lived at one point in time in Connecticut as a child, and we had a curtain on the interior of the ark. We have a curtain on the interior of the ark. For some reason, artists moved the curtain on the interior. At one point, our family moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and we had a small chapel and a large sanctuary, just like in this building. And in the small chapel, there was a very decorative nicely woven exterior curtain. And when you move the curtain apart, there were simple but beautiful wood-stained doors. The curtain was on the outside. In the main sanctuary, like in our main sanctuary, we had the door, and then the curtain was the interior, just as we have here. So different synagogues have taken hold of that element of curtain artistically, and it's changed over hundreds, thousands of years, which is the inclination of life. Things change, but you may come across in your studies or your travels a synagogue or a paruch, a curtain on the exterior, which often is very decorative and beautiful. It's based upon this Torah reading. Now we're going to jump a little bit. We're going to jump 400 years to the Haftorah on page 500. Page 500, if you have a Tanakh at home, it's the book of Kings, 1 Kings chapter 5. And this is where Solomon becomes, well, earlier, chapter 3 and chapter 4 of the book of Kings. Solomon becomes the king. Remember, Saul is the first king. David is the second king. David dies, and David's son Solomon becomes king. Solomon's name in Hebrew is Shlomo, and I have no idea why Shlomo ends up having an N at the end of his name in English. Shlomo, Solomon. I have no idea who came up with the N, because Shlomo ends in an O sound. Why couldn't he be called Solomo in English? I don't know. Anyway, here's Shlomo HaMelech. And remember that the Haftorah usually picks up on a theme in the Torah reading, and the theme of the Torah reading is the details associated with building the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Here in chapter 6, on page 500, we have the beginning of the details of the construction of the temple by Shlomo. It's here on page 500, chapter 6. And the first sentence in chapter 6 is interesting. It says, in the 480th year after the Israelites left the land of Egypt. Well, that may be the case. We're not exactly certain. And it may be that over the course of centuries, I won't say exaggeration crept in, but I will say that there's a small chance that there's an inaccuracy here in the book of Kings. Historians would say that the Israelites had been out of Egypt for in the range of 300 years or so when the time of Solomon is approaching. Approximate. We don't have a specific recorded date of the Exodus. We can only approximate based upon certain indications from archaeologists that have unearthed information about a king named Merneptah in Egypt. So we think that the Exodus took place in the 1240s, 1250s BCE, maybe 1230s, we're not exactly sure. And the temple is described as being built in 950. So we think it's about 300 years from the time of the Exodus to the time of Shlomo, King Solomon. I'm not going to get hung up on a number of years in this chronicle. Instead, I'm going to look at it from this point of view. When the Mishkan is being built, it's a communal, collaborative effort by a bunch of ex-slaves, and they literally had never done anything like this before in their lives. And now they had an opportunity to do something for themselves and for their community and for their descendants. Now, move 300 years into the future when we get to King Solomon. And Solomon, of course, is the king, and the community has now been, as a society, as a governmental body, in operation for 2 generations, Saul and David. So the community is an established community. Saul is on the throne now. There have already been 70 years of monarchy with Saul and with David. So the country is stable and established, and it's fairly wealthy, and Solomon can build a temple that is grandeur incarnate unto himself, of course, with the people's involvement. So the 2 very different experiences that are going on here. The tie-in is that it's the construction for the sake of lifting up the people's spirits. Look at the last two lines on page 502. This is the conclusion of the Haftorah. God speaks to Solomon. It's verses 11 and 12. The word of the Lord came to Solomon with regard to this house you are building. End of verse 12. If you follow my laws and observe my rules and faithfully keep my commandments, I will fulfill for you the promise that I gave to your father David. I will abide among the children of Israel, and I will never forsake my people Israel. So God is saying to Solomon, you have this opportunity to build this beautiful structure. And that's fine, as long as you remember why you're building a structure in the first place. Are you building a structure only for the sake of having very pretty windows and carpeting and wall furnishings? Or are you building the house so that people can come together and be inspired to live as Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel? What's your motive going to be, King Solomon? And that's a phrase that stands out in the Haftorah, which is a little bit different than the presentation in the Torah readings of 4 weeks in a row. These two, skip a week, and the next two. What's your motivation, King Solomon? And you and I, living in this world 3,000 years after Solomon, have the same question placed before us. We have a beautiful building, but what's our motivation in having a beautiful building? Is it only for the sake of, wow, it's really pretty when people come in as visitors and tourists? Or is it to uplift and strengthen us as Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel? And in these strange COVID times, that question is ever more significant and appropriate. So we need to remind ourselves that we have a purpose as members of the children of Israel 3,300 years after a ragtag bunch of slaves stood at a mountain somewhere in the middle of a desert. And our message is to bring mitzvot, sacred obligation and holiness into the world every single day. And without taking too much more of your time, in my mind I'm thinking about last week's Torah reading. There are 53 mitzvot in last week's Torah reading, and just a few of them just to point out. Remember this: don't wrong a stranger or oppress somebody because once you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. Don't ever mistreat or abuse a widow or an orphan or somebody who is vulnerable or defenseless. If you lend money to people, which is a daytime operation, we're not talking about Shabbos, just a regular thing on a Thursday. If you lend money to people and you're members of Israel, don't overcharge interest. Don't curse and insult people. Don't hold a grudge. Now, not cursing and insulting people and not holding a grudge are not typically associated with coming into a synagogue or a temple or a house of God. The purpose of having a building is so we have a place to come to learn about how to live our lives outside the building. And we have people joining in from outside the building, and you are part of us and we are part of you. And we are fulfilling, when we remember these messages and these obligations, we're fulfilling what we first learned at Mount Sinai and what we gained later in the time of King Solomon. We offer our Misha Berach, a prayer of healing for those who are ill, and if you have a name to be included at home as well as here, we ask that you mention those names aloud at this point in time. We say, Misha Berach Avotenu, et Navaronit bat Eliza, Yinta bat Gisha, Chanasara bat Peshalea, Karnia Chaya bat Sarimenu, Pat Cockrell, Avram Yehuda ben Gisha, Elalea bat Daviva, LaClaudia Thomas, Robin Mayer,
Sprinza bat Bashi, Bashi bat Sprinza, Miriam bat Bashi, George Patinos, Wendy Fastman, Tom Bastoni, Avi Moshe ben Mendochana, Billy Singleton, Sheree Singleton, Yaakov ben Leora, Bruce Kahn, Dova ben Zalman, Tom McCarthy, Tobalea bat Freda, Shiravot bat Sarah, Anna Moret, David Shlomo ben Tobanacham, Zach McKiernan, Diane Sizemore, Amen. Almighty God, as you have blessed our mothers and our fathers, bring forth healing of the body, of the mind, and the spirit to all those children named today, kept in our hearts and known to you. Bring forth your blessings of strength and of healing, of gentle power, of love, of uplift, and of support. Revitalize all of your children. Stabilize them, secure them, assist them to stand and walk forward. Let this be the beginning of a new season of improved health and safety and strength for all of your children. Hear this prayer and every prayer related to this prayer, beginning this day and on into the next week. May Shabbat be a time of healing and growth for all of our loved ones. And we all say, Amen. We rise for the Hagbah. Devorah, would you address the table? V'zot ha'torah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. The very bottom of page 177, a prayer for our country. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen. Our prayer for Israel on page 178. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Parech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, stronghold and redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them. Crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace
and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen. On page 184. The top stanza, the last three lines. Eitz chayim hi lama chazikim ba v'tom cheha meushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha Shalom, Hashivenu Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Chodesh, Chodesh Yameinu, Chodesh Yameinu kekedem. Excuse me. We remain standing, En Keloheinu, on page 204. En Keloheinu, En Kadonenu, En Kemalkeinu, En Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michmoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Emalkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shekatiru, Avotenu, Lefanecha, Et K'toret Hasamim. Aleinu on page 205. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kugoye haratzot, velo samanu kimishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vigor aleinu kechol hamonam, Vanachnu korim, umishtachavim, umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, shehu noteh shamayim v'yoser haaretz, umoshav yikaro b'shamayim mima'al, u'shchinatu zo, begavei meromim, hu Eloheinu Enod, Emet Malkeinu, Evazulato, Kakatu B'Torato, V'yodata Yom V'Shevota Elvavecha, Ki Adonai Hu Elohim, B'Shamayim Mimal, V'Al Haaretz, Mitachat Enod. Kagatu b'Toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz, bayomahu, yihyeh Adonai echad,
Ushemo, Ushemo, Ushemo Echad. The Mourner's Kaddish on page 207, and those inclined to remain standing for Kaddish are invited to do so. On this Shabbat, we remember with great love Sam Unger, Ella Abrams, Minnie Cooper, Elsie Rosenthal, Roy Resnick, Gertrude Coleman, Sam Jacoby, Annie Weber, Annie Esther Gerhardt, Essie Fleischacker, Sylvia Stein Newman, Ben Friedberger, Dorothy Corman, Hannah Shield, Morris Muchnick, Dora Camille, Milton Lay, Bertha Abrams, Hyman Rips, Morris Lehman Mayer, Isidore Prince, Mendel Max Muchnick, Nathan Lawrence Sibley, Nathan Ned Aronson Jr. And we remember with sorrow the recent loss of Molly Gross. Are there any other names to mention today? And perhaps you at home have a name to share as well. Yitgadal B'itkadash Shemei Rabbah. Amen. Be'olma Divra Chirute V'yamlich Malchute V'chaye Echon V'yom Echon V'chaye D'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala V'zman Kariv V'yimeru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Lo'olam Olalmei Olmaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yit'aleh V'yithalal Shemei Dekudesha B'richu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Da'amiran Ba'alma V'yimeru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Olenu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Olenu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen. Our hearts are open to those who are in grief and mourning at this time. May you know that you are loved, and may peace come forward. We'll be making Kiddush and Hamotzi in just a few minutes, and perhaps those joining in at home have a glass of wine or grape juice and a bit of bread prepared. Just a couple of reminders before we do Adon Olam and then Kiddush and Hamotzi. Of course, Zoom Havdalah tonight at 7 o'clock, and Monday morning Tanakh is on Zoom. Tuesday, Adult Hebrew is on Zoom, and Spirit Discussion on Zoom. Next Shabbat, we have a special guest. Julian Cohen of the ISJL is going to be joining us virtually, both for Friday night and Shabbos morning services, and also with a Sunday school lesson for our Sunday school children on Zoom. So we will just figure out what we're doing, because that's what we're all doing these current days. We will just figure out what we're doing. But it is a good reminder that we are not alone, and there are other Jewish communities out there, and they're joining in with us. And there are people who are concerned about us. We have advocates out there, and that lifts us up. So Adon Olam on page 211, and then Kiddush and Motzi. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'ed nasa v'chefzo kol azai melech shemo nikra. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la,
ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. V'yachare kichlot hakol lavado yimloch nora v'hoaya v'hove v'hoyeh b'tifara, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. V'hu echad v'yein sheni lahamshir lo lahachbira b'li reshit b'li tachlit v'lo ha'oz v'ha'misra, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. V'hu eli v'chai go'ali v'tzorchev li b'yet tzara v'onisi umanos li menad kosi b'yom ekra, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Biyado avkid ruchi b'yet ishan b'yaira v'imruchi keveyati Adonai lev lo ira, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. It's Shabbos. Let's make Kiddush. It's Shabbos. Hi, Mom. Mom's joining in. Thank you, Gadiel. Mom's joining in. So it's always a pleasure to have people joining in from near and far. We have people from all over. And it's a delight. We're connected. In these times, we need to be connected. So, Gadiel, you doing Vishamro?
Yeah, sure.
Start us off.
Yisharu b'nei Israel
Et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'doratam brit olam, b'ni uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti li'olam, ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai, et ha-shamayim v'et haaretz, uvayom ha-shvi, Shabbat v'inafash. Okay, God bless the seventh day, made it holy, and we make time holy as well. Sareh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagofim. Do you want to wash, Gadiel? You probably remember, although it's been a little while, that we wash hands before making the motzi. It's called netilas yadayim or netilas yadayim. It's a reminder that bread is a great gift. Food, sustenance is a great gift. And so Gadiel's washing netilas yadayim and then the hamotzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lehem min haaretz.
Amen. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining us. You bring us an element of spirit when you join in, and it means a great deal. Litro, until we see each other again, Shabbat Shalom for now.